So picture it. You're driving alone just before dark, somewhere between Broward and Miami-Dade. The air is heavy, it's the kind that like sticks to your skin, and the canals on the roadside, they just kind of look like sheets of black glass. And then all of a sudden you feel it, that dull thump, 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 and the car starts to pull. You ease over to the shoulder, climb out, sure enough, flat tire. Back in the mid-70s, that wasn't a big deal. You wave somebody down, maybe a guy in a pickup truck with a toolbox, and you'd probably be back on the road in half an hour, unless the person who stopped you was the reason your tire went flat in the first place. You're listening to True Crime Unchained. I'm Tim, and today we're talking about Florida's most haunting series of unsolved killings, the flat tire murders. It's a pattern that terrified South Florida in 1975 and 1976, and to this day, no one has ever stood trial for it. To understand how this could even happen, you gotta picture South Florida in the 1970s. No cell phones, no GPS, no roadside assistance on an app. Hitchhiking, it wasn't just a thing that drifters did, it was like normal. Young women would hitchhike to work, to bars, from one end of town to the other. And if your car broke down, you didn't call AAA. You hoped the next driver who came along would be nice enough to stop. So in early 1975, a 23-year-old woman named Barbara Davis Stevens leaves her apartment in Lauderdale Lakes, heading to Coral Gables for a job interview. And she just never arrives. Her car turns up abandoned in Miami. One tire is flat, suspiciously. A couple days later, her body's found in a canal off State Road 84. She's been stabbed, partially undressed, and left in the water just like, a piece of trash. Now, at the time, you don't have this big headline like screaming serial killer. It's just a brutal, just tragic case, and investigators are trying to figure out who she might have left with, whether she knew them, and whether this was a one-off attack. And then it happens again. Just a couple months later, 17-year-old Arietta Tinker goes out she goes out near this Hollywood beach bar. She's young, she's out with friends, and she ends up leaving the place alone. Then her nude body is found later in Snake Creek Canal. The cause of death points to drowning, but it's clear that something violent happened before she ended up in that canal. So there's two women now, both found in canals, both last seen alone at night in roughly the same region. And that's where this kind of starts to feel less like coincidence and more like a pattern that's kind of, quietly forming in the background. As that Florida summer hits, the tone shifts, the violence escalates, and the pattern, if you're looking back now, is kind of clear. So then we have another. On June 18th, 1975, two 14-year-old girls, Barbara Schreiber and Belinda Zetterauer, sneak out for what they think is just going to be an ordinary night. They're best friends. They're walking along near Highway 27 and the C9 Canal. It's, one of those things that teenagers do. It's like being rebellious and a little adventure. I used to do the shit too. But they never come home. The next day, fishermen find their bodies in the canal, laid out side by side, shot and dumped. Their clothes are on the bank, but it's weird. They're neatly folded. It's like just a strange image if you picture it in your mind. And again, we have the same key detail. They're left in or near a canal, out in that fringe where the suburbs kind of fade into the swamp, And then there's Ronnie Sue Gorlin. She was 27 years old from Miami Beach. In July, she rents a car to go visit a friend at the hospital. The rental car is later found with a slash tire. Ronnie never makes it home. Her body's discovered naked in the Graham Canal. She was sexually assaulted and stabbed. And the flat tire crew is right there in front of the investigators. Her car's disabled. Her body's in a canal not far away. So by this point, it's just not one or two cases. You have multiple women, teens, young adults. They vanish from roadside bars and just like these everyday environments. They're last seen alone at night or near dark. Uh, their bodies turn up in canals running through Broward and Miami-Dade. They're nude or partially nude, stabbed, strangled, shot, or drowned. Now, looking at it as a whole, it's almost like someone built their hunting ground around those waterways. The canals become both like dump sites, but like a sort of signature. So investigators eventually land on a working theory that the killer may have deliberately flattened these women's tires and then circled back to help, like by offering a ride or assistance. It explains why some cars are abandoned with damaged tires and why these attacks like cluster around roads and canals. It's a predator using a simple trick, just enough damage to make you vulnerable and to basically control who becomes a victim. Once law enforcement realizes these cases might be connected, they form a task force. In Broward and Miami-Dade, detectives start doing what they can with the tools that they have in the mid-'70s. They drag canals, they map where bodies are found, and they compare notes between departments, which back then wasn't really, that didn't really happen a lot. They interview potential witnesses who remember a man offering rides or a suspicious vehicle cruising the shoulders. At one point, there are reports of a van, different descriptions of a man with a southern accent, and a lot of half-formed leads that don't quite solidify into one clear suspect. If this were happening today, you'd see cell phone pings and license plate readers, DNA swabs on the cars, but back then it's just like notebooks and memory. Evidence is limited. The forensic tools are nowhere near what we have now. And as the years go by, the task force is disbanded and the case gets folded in just wider stack of cold cases, you know. The pattern doesn't disappear, but it kind of fades from the headlines. Other serial offenders pop up in Florida, the Gulf Killer around Tampa, for example. And there has been speculation about whether some of these series could be connected or whether we're really looking at several predators operating in the same area. Well, decades pass and, you know, these families, they just grow older without answers, and detectives retire. Boxes of files are moved from one shelf to another, but the case never really fully goes away. It just kind of sits and waits. Fast forward nearly 50 years. Technology finally catches up with the evidence that was preserved. Cold case detectives send clothing and other items from some of these victims back to the lab, this time for advanced DNA testing and genetic genealogy. And for the first time, they get what looks like a solid hit. The testing points to a man named Robert Clark Keebler. He's a convicted felon with a violent history in Florida, but unfortunately, he is now long dead. Some of the DNA recovered from the victim evidence links to him. He's like the kind of person you could imagine fitting into the story. Dude with a record, living in roughly the right place at roughly the right time, with a known history of targeting women. But the frustrating part is that he's already dead. So there's no trial, no interrogation, no taped confessions where he gets to walk detectives through each crime scene. And not every victim in like broader flat tire cluster is tied to him by DNA, but I mean, at least not what's been made public. So even with this name, the picture isn't clean and complete. Was this Keebler dude, the flat tire killer, responsible for all of those deaths? Was he responsible for some but not others? Was he just one predator asshole among several using the same corridors and canals? I mean, or is it like the pattern we see partly the result of hindsight with different crimes grouped together because they look similar but have, different origins? Those are kind of the questions that still like hang over this case. Today, the flat tire murders sit in that like strange space where a case is not like fully frozen, but it's not solved either. We have a likely suspect tied to at least some of the evidence, but we don't have the kind of resolution that lets families go, we know who did this and we saw justice done in a courtroom. Um, for the families, that's got to be, what hurts the most. They've carried this grief for decades. And even when you like hand them a name, it's not the same as seeing that person answer for what they did. For investigators, it's like a reminder of how vulnerable people were and still are when their routine is interrupted with something as like simple as a flat tire, a small mechanical failure, or one deliberate act of sabotage, and suddenly your life like depends on whoever stops to help you. When I look back on cases like that, I think there's a temptation to imagine that we'd never fall for something like that. We'd call a friend, we'd stay in the car, we'd be more careful. But, honestly, the truth is those women didn't do anything wrong. They did what made sense at that time and that place. They accepted on a dark road in a world that hadn't yet learned how many fucking monsters were just out there. If you have any information about these cases, even if it's something you heard secondhand from a relative or an old neighbor, cold case units in South Florida still take tips. In cases like this, sometimes the thing that breaks it open isn't high tech. It's a memory that someone's just been sitting on for years. This has been True Crime Unchained. I'm Tim. And if you found this story like as unsettling as I did, make sure you follow the show. Uh, Share it with someone who loves, cold cases and true crime and things like that, especially from the state of Florida. Uh, Next time we will continue in Florida, but we're heading to a place I grew up in, and we'll be looking at William Bryan Cruz Jr., who killed 6 people and injured 14 after snapping in the town of Palm Bay, Florida, where I moved to in 1993. Till then, stay safe, take a look at your surroundings. If your tire goes flat on a lonely road, think carefully about who you let get close. Till next time, this is Tim filming from Estero, Florida. Peace.